Hi there, welcome to the next video in my sequence looking at reprogramming my X-Touch Mini now that I've got the honeycomb, yoke and throttle quadrant. So we're using axes and O's, and this video really follows directly on from the previous one. So I'm not going to go into step-by-step minute detail of how you make the allocations. That was dealt with in previous videos, so you'll need to backtrack if you've just entered here and you don't quite know what's going on. Backtrack a video or two. So I'm going to put a link at the top. Will come up sometime around now, so you can backtrack to the previous video, or look in my channel for my playlist and look for the honeycomb playlist that's there. So it builds on the previous video, and this is where we left it in the previous video. For those of you who haven't seen, let's bring my this is the actual X-Touch controller, and what I was trying to avoid was using this button here, which brings it into layer B. You've got effectively two controls in the same box. You've got device A and device B, and I'm trying to get it all so everything is on one layer. Makes it easier in flight not to have to remember to change between different layers. The only time I'm going to use layer B is, let's get that out of the way, and using layer B for the interior lighting, which you don't use very often, but it's not difficult to remember to switch to layer B to adjust the lighting at night time and then put it back to layer A again. So I used a technique which uses a variable, a local variable that we define for each of the channels on the controller, so that we can swap between megahertz and kilohertz by pressing the button on the end here, or between the outer and the inner by pressing there. So that's the swap that will be made. So there's a variable that we use to do that, and it also controls whether the lights are on or off, and a ring of LEDs around the button, so we know whether we're in megahertz or kilohertz mode. So it's like having the stacked rotaries that there are actually on the G1000 unit, that the two are stacked one on top of another. And we've programmed in the swap so we can bring the frequency from standby to active and back again, and the swap between nav1 and nav2 radios. Same for the COM, same kind of emulation here for the PDF stack of rotaries, so that when we push that, it's like pushing the end of the rotary to enter different modes. Where I left it was debating about this one here, which was switching between the heading and the range, on the course and the barometer setting. And I didn't like the fact that that was over here, because this is the most sensible button here to put the sync heading, so that when you click on there it brings the heading bug in line with your course, and it's nice to have it above there. So I did swap the two over. And I'll just quickly tell you how I did the swap, because it really isn't very difficult. If I bring in my axes and O's, again I'll put my the actual device in the top right hand corner. So I wanted to move the heading, which was allocated to this controller here, and I wanted to move it to this one here, and it's controlled by a couple of scripts. The range script that I wrote, so in my scripts it was the range script, and I've got one for decrease and one for increase, and all you do is you bring up that script and you turn the knob of the one you want it to appear on. So if I want it to appear on this end knob here, if I just turn that, it now detects you want to move it to there, but I'm obviously not going to move it, so I'll cancel out of that. So for the range one, it was bring in that script, turn that knob to the left, bring in the increase, turn that, and each time you just click save and it remembers you moved it. You must remember that you're going to move the toggle, so that when you press on the end it switches between heading and range. So again, you bring that up, press the button, press save, then go and do exactly the same for the other one, the course, increase, decrease and swap. So move your control around when you've allocating in the wrong place and you don't like where it is really easy. You don't have to go hunting for or writing scripts again, or you just move them. The last thing you must remember to do is to change the lights, because it'll be lighting up the wrong bulb. So in my scripts area, this is my LED script. That was pointing to the wrong bulb, so change it so this is pointing at bulb 14 and this is pointing at bulb 13. Don't bother changing anything here, just change the two numbers over and click on update, and it will then light the right bulb up. I hope that makes sense. It's not that hard. Where are we going now? Well, it's these buttons here. Let's bring my cockpit back up again. And it's over here. It's these MFD buttons over here that I'm going to program in. So if I wanted to program in the Direct To button, if I bring in my axes and those again, it's already programmed in, so I just press that and it will identify itself. The green light will come on. There it is. There's my Direct To. So all I've done there is I had to filter for it. There's too many commands. So I'm looking for my A1000, the MFD, apply the filter, and these are nicely in alphabetical order down here. So I'm looking for my Direct To. So you double click on that, press the button, press save, there, and it's done. So it just brings it into position. And the same for the flight plan, the menu, the procedure, the enter. Just use the filter, find them, and then double click, bring it in, save. So click the button, save. It's in. The one that's a little trickier is this one here, the clear button, because you can see on here that the clear actually has two functions. A short press on there just clears the entry you're making, but a long click on here, if I do a long click, it kind of backtracks and it should bring you back to the default map. Back if you get lost in the menu system. So there's a long click on here that brings you back if you've gone anywhere odd. And that's what we want to try and emulate here. So what I'll do is I'll deallocate it and we'll allocate it again just to show you the procedure. So I'm going to make a new allocation, and this is where if you do this in the wrong order, it just takes a while to undo it. So let's get it in the right order. I want to allocate a long click to it. So when I click here, it now says, okay, what's the short click? What's the long click? It doesn't matter which order you allocate these in now, but you've now got the ability to add both of them. So we'll go and hunt down the short click first of all, and it's the clear here, the ordinary clear. So we put that in, and now we're going to do the long click version. And there it is, there's the clear long click. So bring that in. You can define what you mean by a long click. So with me, that's about half a second. Anything longer than half a second, it counts as a long click. It might be too sensitive for you. Change that as you like. And you change it just by pointing to it and rolling with the mouse. Or double click and type it in. I'm going to add that now, so I just need to press the button once. It doesn't have to be a long click or a short click, it's just saying which button you're talking about, and it's that one there. Add, and now you can see that it's got two allocations on the same button. So that's the only tricky one there. The other buttons I wanted to allocate were the flight director and the VNAV. So let's have a look where the flight director is. The flight director isn't an H variable or a B variable. It's quite an old-fashioned A event, an A variable. It's actually hidden in the flight assistance section, but if you do a search for the director, apply that filter, there it is, toggle flight director. So you double click, press the button, apply it. And what it does, if you haven't seen the flight director, A lot of people haven't explored that. It took me a while to work it out as well. At the moment, the flight director is on, so it gives you a guide of where you should be pointing your controls to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And it has an effect. It's an assistance on the roll and the pitch. But if I press that now, you'll see that the bars have gone off and the assistance has gone off. So even without the autopilot switched on, you will get some assistance from the flight director. So, but if you want to do free flight and having no interference or support, you can switch it on and off. So that's there. Now the VNAV, I have to admit that I haven't actually explored vertical navigation, VNAV, yet. I generally fly old-fashioned. In fact, I don't fly GPS very often. I tend to fly either with visual maps or using the VORs. Just the way I am, just what I like doing. So I haven't really explored this bit where you can put the altitude in for the various waypoints. So I haven't been able to test whether the VNAV is working yet. So that's something I personally got to get to. So on the VNAV button, I've got a couple of choices. What I put in at the moment is this one here, the GPS VNAV. When I did a search down here for VNAV, filtered it, I've got a couple of choices. That's the one I've chosen, the GPS VNAV button. It might be the one that works. I've also found it here in this basic script that comes with axes and O's. The basic VNAV toggle, so it could be that one I'm using. Might just be this one here in the HTML variables, but this is really designed for a different unit. But some of them do cross between the 530 and the G1000 and the 3000 indeed, because they're all made by Garmin, so that might work. But I seriously doubt that that's going to be the one. So that's a work in progress on that one there. But to be honest with you, that is it. That concludes the X-Touch as it is. Just going to do some test flights and see if it's working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to look at the switches on the throttle quadrant, the honeycomb throttle quadrant. To do that, I'm going to move my camera. So I'm going to put a pause on this while I move my camera, and then I'll come back and talk through those switches. Okay, so I've moved my camera and I'm back here again in the cockpit, and let's just talk through what I've got and what I want to achieve. So on the honeycomb yoke, the alpha control, this has already got all these light switches as hardware switches. Same with the battery up here, the alternator, those are allocated, and the magneto switch and the start switch. They're allocated. In fact, if I come out of here for a second and look at the control options, I'm using the alpha flight controls with the default profile just as it came out of the box. You plug it in and it detects it. And so all those lights are exactly as they are. And I don't see any point changing them particularly, because I generally fly light aircraft, general aviation stuff. So they may not be in the right position to emulate the cockpit I'm in, but they're the functions I'm going to need. And they're already labelled on there, so I'm going to leave them alone. Same with the magneto switch. Don't think they need playing around with. Every aircraft I fly will be those. The ones I might change might be allocating the camera settings on the hat switch, and not happy with how they're allocated at the moment. But I don't see any point doing this in axes and O's. It's not going to vary as I move from one aircraft to another. I don't think yet, but I can always come back and do that later. What I will change, I have changed, is the Bravo throttle quadrant, because that's going to vary depending which aircraft I'm in, where things are. And so I haven't touched the autopilot functions. I guess they're going to be pretty much the same standard everywhere, so untouched. And I'm not touching the flap button, because that will work for most of the general aircraft, the GAs, that you press down and it increases the flap, press up and it decreases the flap. So that seems like a good idea to move that, leave that as it is. If you're flying something else that needs a finer control, you can always put a flap lever on here and control that axis. It's marked in degrees on the actual markings. So you've got that flap one there. These buttons here are by default, when it detects it, puts the same allocation as the switches on the Honeycomb yoke. You've got the beacon switch, the taxi lights, the nav lights, and they kind of interfere with each other. So I have gone through and just removed any allocation there is for that, and that is now going to be controlled by axes and O's, because that will vary between aircraft, as will the axes here on all the different levers. Depends on whether you've got a simple mixture and throttle, or you've got a propeller control, or carb heat, single engine, twin engine. So that will have to travel from aircraft to aircraft. So axis and O's will detect that automatically and change it. I don't want to have to keep coming in here to remember to change as I move from one aircraft to another. And I don't like the way the trim wheel works as standard, so I put that into axis and O's so I can have a better control over that, which I will show you any second now. So let's go back into the cockpit. Let's resume that flight. And if I put my camera up in the top right hand side, so these are the buttons here at the top, and these are in the default position, and this one is switched on because that one is controlling my fuel cutoff. So I couldn't start the engines until I moved that one. Each switch actually is 2 buttons. There's a button at the top and a button at the bottom, and it does detect when you change them. So what I want to allocate to that are the fuel pump and the pitot heat, because they're not on the yoke. That one's inoperative. That one doesn't do anything anyway, so I'm not going to bother with that one. And I want to have the parking brake and the fuel cutoff available on these buttons over here. So let's have a look at that. Let's go through them. So the first one here is the fuel pump. And this again is a good old-fashioned one. It's not a HVAR or a BVAR or anything like that. So just do a search for electric fuel pump, but there is only a set version of it. And a sort of a tip to put it in. What we're going to be doing is setting it to be either 0 or to be 1. That's the on and off. And at the moment I've left that in its off position, and I want it to be on when I move the switch up. So I would allocate, if this was blank, I would start the allocation, make sure it's in the default position, which is off, and I would set the 1 position first, and it comes up as 1 by default. Then I would press this, and it detects that it's button 33, save it. It will be in the 1 position now, so I would use the other one, make the allocation, set it to 0, and click down so it detects it's button 34. If I move it up now, you'll see it move to 33, but I want it to register that it's the down position for 34, and click save. So you've now got the 2 different positions for that fuel pump, button 33 and button 34. So if we look, you can see the 2 working. So that's the set version. The pitot heat, if I move that one, that has got an on and an off version, so it's easy to set. But again, start with it off and then allocate the on. Don't worry about this number here, it's always 1. The on, so just do pitot heat 1 on, and make sure that's reading 35, and then set the off version to button 36 by turning the button downwards. Click save, and it's on 36. Let's do the parking brake next. So the parking brake again is one that is just got a set version, so you want it to be set on by default. So there's the on version. Sorry, that's the off version. Let's get the on version. There we are. Parking brake on is on 46, so that's that way there. The parking brake set on, and I want it off on the other one. I'll get it right in a minute. That's the off version, and that's set on 45, not 46, 45. So parking brake is off now and on now. So it's on in that switch. The default is it's on. This is really sort of in my head the other way around. That I want it when it's parked. I want to have the fuel cut off. It's one of the strange things with the 172 when you go into it cold and dark, that it's left with the fuel open. I'm sure it should be closed. Anyway, I want to start with it closed. So this one here, this cutoff is a B variable. And I found that by going into the aircraft behaviors, into the interior, looking at the input events for the fuel, and you can see there's a fuel cutoff. And there isn't increment and decrement, increase, decrease. They don't make much sense. It's the fuel pump set that makes most sense. So what I have got in my axes and O's, there's the fuel cutoff set. Of course, you can't, if you saw my previous videos, you can't just pull those from a menu and double click and put them in. You have to initially add them as a custom event. So you've found out what they're called, a custom event. A B variable, and type it in, and then it becomes available to you. So it's currently set so that the off is on button 44, so that's the fuel cutoff, so that fuel won't flow, and the other one is set so the fuel will flow. So that's button 43. It's set so it will flow. So let's just see that in action. If I cancel that, so now when I push that forward, you see the fuel cutoff is animated, and if I leave it there, I won't be able to start my engines. The fuel is cut off. So if I try, it'll spin and then die, so it won't work. Turn the fuel valve on, and we're now up and running. So that's the fuel valve. The last one is to look at the trim wheel and how that's working. Initially, when you put it in, it detects every time you move it, it moves past the sensor, and it sends one trim down or one trim up event, and it's very slow. That if you're looking at the trim wheel, and if I just move it, it hardly moves at all. And even if you spin it like a hamster wheel, it takes ages to get anywhere. So the trick with it is to actually make two allocations for the trim up and the trim down. The first one is the standard one. As you turn it, it sends one version of the event every time it passes the sensor. But if you put an accelerated version into it, using this thing called a fast turn, it detects when you're moving it quickly. It will actually send multiple versions, as if you're sort of hammering away on the key on the keyboard. And the maximum you can send is 9 clicks with each sense of the sensor. So I've got it set to its maximum at the moment. So not only are you turning it quickly, but it's also sending 9 times the input. You can control what you decide is a fast turn, how fast you want that fast turn to be. But if you look now, if you watch the trim up, trim down, if I do a small trim down, just a gentle one, the trim wheel is moving, but it's moving relatively slowly, so it's good for fine control. But if I give it a good spin and start moving it, then it's sending 9 pulses each time I go around. So it's a much faster turn. I've done the same for the trim wheel in the other way. It moves quite quickly. It's sending 9 pulses. And then if I get to near where I want to be, I can slow down and do a fine adjustment with that. So I find that it's pretty usable in flight. That's not too bad at all. So that's it really. That's everything that I've got so far on the X-Touch. That's everything I've got so far on the throttle quadrant, and I haven't touched my my Stream Deck at all yet. So I'll do a couple of test flights and then we'll see if I need to make changes on my Stream Deck. But that's it really. So I'm going to go off and do some flying. I don't feel like I've flown very much. I've spent a long while programming stuff. So I'm going to have a couple of, probably a week or so of flying. I've actually got some holiday time coming up, so I'll be away from my computer for a while. So I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks, a report on the VNAV, see if I get that sorted out, and a quick look at the Stream Deck and see what changes I need to make to that. And then we can move on to another aircraft. Okay, thanks a lot for watching. It helps the algorithm to push it, apparently, to push this up to the top if you do subscribe or click a like. So if you think other people need help finding it, that helps me. I don't make any money out of this. I don't monetize anything. I'm just providing this for free. So, you know, just make it easier for other people to find it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and well done if you've got as far as this. Okay, and I'll see you in the next one.